he's made of money. I mean, his name is Danny Dollar. It looks certainly like his own dollar on the front. Oh, yeah.
And that was intentional. As a first-time author, I knew that I had many strikes against me.
Is there anything better than a trip getting ready?
Nope.
For a long journey where our podcast released a new epi, searching for a fade fiend, new fixation. Giving this a subscribe is the same sensation. Started with the day ones, they gave us fuel to support the season. Could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here for a reason. Notification bells, text some friends, all to let you know. Check your Bluetooth, connect, talking wisdom.
Welcome in, everyone. Episode 33. I like big bucks, and I cannot lie. We are here with Allan Jackson. Now, this gentleman has an honorary doctorate. He is an award-winning children's book author, and he's a youth motivational speaker just to get started. We're going to get into a little bit more. Mr. Jackson, how the heck are you doing today?
I am great. I do better if you just call me Ty. Just keep it really, really simple.
Oh, I can.
Okay, please do. I don't think major formalities need to be installed for a guy that writes children's books. We can just go with Ty. Keep it real simple. I'm a kid from the hood.
That's good.
Formalities are not necessary.
Speaking of which, so where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in the Bronx, New York. I was born in 1967, which sounds weird to say it out loud. And I grew up like in almost every stereotypical way of the Bronx that you could think of, yet not. And what I mean by that is that, yes, there was drugs and crime and poverty, but there was also a huge sense of community. And that sense of community really helped create a more epic, compassionate guy that you would probably get from the Bronx. I also got to witness the birth of hip hop music. And so to literally see hip hop conceived, born, nurtured, and grow into what it is today right in front of me was really something that was unbelievably beautiful.
South Bronx, South Bronx.
There we go. That's what's up.
So you offered it, and I like stereotypes. I think they're funny. So if you're from the Bronx, I want to go to that first stereotype.
Yep.
What's that jump shot looking like? You a b-ball player?
It could not be weaker. I don't think I actually stepped on a court until I was probably like almost a teenager. I gravitated to baseball really quickly because when you're from the Bronx, the Yankees are as homegrown as anything else. So I played baseball. That was my sport. That's what I watched. That's what I played. I'm also only 5'5" on a very, very good day. So so playing basketball was not my go-to game.
What position? What was your favorite position in baseball?
Then it's funny you asked that question because I idolized Mickey Rivers, and if you are an old school baseball fan, you know that Mickey Rivers was the center fielder for many of the championship Yankees, and I really idolized him. So I played center field like he did. And I think that that's also an example and a microcosm of why representation matters. We generally gravitate to the things that we admire and adore the most. And so I always played center field because the person I idolized played center field. And I know that it's kind of a few degrees of separation, but I think also having books featuring children of color and having them represented in a fun and positive way kind of gives them a sense of idolization towards those characters as well as myself as an author. So I hold idolizing a center fielder from the Yankees from 50 years ago in very, very high regard to how it is I navigate myself as an author today.
Center field, I'm going to say you had some wheels and that arm must have been a cannon.
It was pretty good.
Am I right?
I was by far always the fastest guy on the team, and I won't say I had a cannon, but I will say don't challenge me. So
Did you ever get a Willie Mays basket catch?
No, I don't think I was ever. I didn't get the Willie Mays basket catch. What I did get was a lot of Ricky Henderson's almost a home run, but bringing it back. Those I did a
Ooh.
lot of. Never did the basket over the shoulder basket catch. Never had that. But I've taken away many a home run. So
What's that base stealing look like? You brought up Ricky. What's that base stealing look like with that speed?
oh, of course, top notch. I played high school ball. That's as far as I got because, like I said, at 5'5", everybody just skyrocketed over me after high school. But yeah, you couldn't run on me from center field, but you couldn't catch me if you were catching.
I love it. Any chance any of that's gonna make it to YouTube? You got any old footage? You got?
Oh, not even a lick. I mean, there were no cell phones. There were no really even camcorders around that time, and we also grew up relatively impoverished. So there were no very sophisticated forms of tech that mom had to kind of capture those moments. I wish. I don't even have photographs now that I think about it.
Oh,
but they live in here, and and I'm content with that.
oh, that's good stuff. All right, so can you tell us the journey? How did you get to children's books? Yeah. I feel like a tough guy from the Bronx, my words, but again, I'm just hanging on that stereotype. How'd you end up with children's books? I'm so curious.
Yeah, well, let's remove the tough guy part from the Bronx. just remove that. Like that stereotype within me does not exist.
Okay.
I like to think that I am many things prototypically from the Bronx. Tough isn't necessarily one of them. But, okay. So my path to authorship happened when I was 40 years old. And I was working a corporate job and really enjoyed my job, but it was just a job. And my son, when he was about 8 years old at the time, he asked a question that would change my life. And he simply said, "Dad, can we open up a lemonade stand?" And we did. And he made $50 in 3 hours selling lemonade. And then he said, "Dad, what am I going to do with this $50? And I said, "I don't know." So I went to my local bookstore to try to find a book to teach my son about what to do with the $50 that he earned. And I noticed two things. One, there were so few books teaching kids about money. And there were also so few books that featured a young Black contemporary kid that looked like my son in a fun, positive way that wasn't connected with slavery and segregation and overcoming and historical and cultural, just something fun. And so I kind of put those two components together. The name Danny Dollar just popped into my head. I went home and started writing. It took a year to write the story. And after 147 rejections from publishers and agents, I decided to publish it myself. I named my publishing company, Big Head Books. You can see why. And then 2 years after my son said, "Hey, Dad, can we open up a lemonade stand?" this book was born. And it was one of the proudest days of my life because it made me realize that I could do anything I put my heart and soul into.
That's exceptional. That cover is remarkable. For those who are only looking at audio, I challenge you to go and look at it. The young man looks like he looks like he's made of money. I mean, that is his name is Danny Dollar. It looks certainly like his own dollar on the front. Oh, yeah.
And that was intentional. As a first-time author, I knew that I had many strikes against me. Like I don't have a publisher, I don't have an agent, and I have no distribution at all. So the one thing that I could control was the image of the actual book, because especially for children's books, I feel like you can judge a book by its cover. So I wanted something that was really familiar. And, it looks like a dollar bill. And that's something that all kids, all people would be familiar with. So my book, when it's on the shelf next to a bunch of other books, it really stands out. Because it looks like something that we're already familiar with. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've been as successful and why I've sold over 150,000 copies of this book alone.
Wow. That's awesome. I gotta go back. Rejected 147 times. Bro, when you got to 3 digits, what kept you going? I'm not saying a lot of people are quitters, but I feel like there's some times where we think the writing is on the wall and we talk ourselves out of it to say, well, you're not being efficient right now. How did you keep going and not talk yourself out of this?
Well, I may have taken away the tough moniker, but I am resilient. I think resiliency is a huge part of any level of success. And that's something that was instilled in me a long time ago. So I got that high a number of rejections because, one, of my resiliency and knowing that this was important, and as well as just being tenacious. But I also really believed in it. And I also thought that there was no other way. Like this is traditionally how you get a book published. You have to submit it to someone. Someone has to anoint it or approve it. And like, just as a novice, I didn't really know any better that you could kind of do this on your own. But the more rejections I received, the more alternatives I tried to find. And so the biggest and most viable alternative for me to be successful in this field was to do it myself. And so, I started my own publishing company, worked with a great team of people to help me get the skill set to learn how to publish. And
Yes.
and I'm fortunate that I did, because I'm able now to publish my own books. I have 6 books total, 5 of which I published myself. I've sold over 250,000 copies of those books independently. And it's all because of the being rejected. Because if I didn't get rejected, I wouldn't have had the skill set to do it myself.
I'm curious of that process. So you're the guy, you're the brain, you're coming up with the words. What was that journey like with the illustrator? I feel like there could be a little push-pull. Maybe you got to flex and say, "Wait, hey, these are my words." How did that journey go?
So as a new author, or as a beginning author, aspiring author, I really had no idea on how to recruit an illustrator. And I went through Craigslist and Googled and even put up posters in schools and stuff like that looking for someone. And it was funny. It was about 3-4 months into the process of looking for an illustrator and interviewing a few people, but not really finding that soulmate type of person.
Yes.
And then one day, can't make this up, I went to church, and I'm sitting in church, and I prayed, and I said to God to help me find an author, an illustrator for these books, because He knows my heart's sincere, that I'm doing this for a positive reason. And then something said as I was praying to ask the person next to me. So this perfect stranger, I said, "Excuse me, miss, I know this may sound like really, really strange, but do you happen to know an illustrator?" And the woman said, "Well, my son is very artistic. He happens to be in the choir. Why don't you talk to him?" I approached him. His name is John. He had never illustrated a book before, but he was an amazing artist. I gave him I took him out for tea, and I said, this is the thing that I'm envisioning. And that night he faxed, old school, he faxed me an image of what he conceived the character to look like. And it was this character. And the moment that I saw it, I'm like, that's my guy. And I always say to myself, that was God's way of saying, next time you want something, you ask me first.
Yeah. All right. So when you had the opportunity to get this book started, you didn't have any mentors. Were there any people that you could find to kind of help you along? Where did you find just a little bit of help from, if at all?
I actually got the greatest mentors that have ever lived, because one of the powers of books is that you can actually receive one-on-one mentorship from some of the greatest minds that have ever lived. So my mentors were Bill Gates. My mentors were Steve Jobs. My mentors were Barack Obama. My mentors were Oprah Winfrey, because I would study their levels of success and how they got there. And they would tell me within the words of these books what it is that they did to become successful. And I just implemented some of those principles that I learned from them. And so while I didn't have a physical mentor, I had many literary mentors, and still do to this day. So that's one of the things I tell people about books, is that it allows you to have a one-on-one conversation with some of the greatest minds who have ever lived, and they can tell you their successes and their failures, and you can replicate them in any way you see fit.
Let's talk these awards. Award-winning children's book author. This is your time. Please, Ty, don't be humble. We want to know, what awards did you get?
Well, a stereotypical thing from the Bronx you can say is, I won't say that I lack humility, but I'm a proud kid who would definitely pound his chest when he's doing something really, really well. I will say, I've won many awards. Fortunately, one of the first ones I won was from my community, and it was the inaugural the inaugural Dr. Martin Luther King Content of Character Award in the state of Massachusetts. Oh. And that was really meaningful to me because it was my first kind of large award. It was bestowed upon me from my community for the work that I had done in promoting literacy. And it was obviously named after one of the great leaders of humanity. Yes. And so that was really pretty powerful. The most recent one I won was actually an award based off of a program I did titled the Danny Dollar Entrepreneur Fair. My most recent book is titled Danny Dollars Make Your Own Money. From that book, I created a program called the Danny Dollar Entrepreneur Fair, which is a program exactly like a science fair, except instead of kids showcasing how a light bulb works or how a volcano erupts, they're showcasing their ideas for a business. And I won an award for financial literacy and entrepreneur empowerment for children from an organization called Judith's Reading Room. And I'm really, really proud of this program because I think that it is kind of the benchmark for why I'm doing what I'm doing. Yes. As empowering young people to become the best versions of themselves, to introduce financial literacy and entrepreneurship to them, and for them to cultivate that into something that is just theirs. And this Danny Dollar Entrepreneur Fair is the catalyst for making that happen.
It's prolific. You said there are 6 books, 5 you published yourself. Correct. Can you kind of talk us through them? I kind of like to know the background. You did tell us about the first book, but just like, how did you get motivated for each book? What was your inspiration?
Yeah, so again, Danny Dollar was created, my first book, to teach kids about finance and entrepreneurship because of a question from my son. My second book was titled When I Close My Eyes. It is a book that teaches kids about the power of imagination. And my third book is a book titled The Super Duper Kid, which is just a classic good versus evil superhero story. I created this book. All of my books, I feel like I've created for some type of agenda to teach kids about financial literacy or the power of imagination or self-esteem. This book I wrote for me. This book I wrote because of my love and infatuation for superheroes, for the mythology of superheroes. And so I wrote this book just to make me happy. And in doing so, it's become, out of all the books that I've sold, the kid's favorite book. Every child that's read all of my books will say that this book was their favorite, and I think you can tell because of the joy that radiates from me writing this book. Yeah, I have a sequel to that book titled Move, and which is just a sequel to The Super Duper Kid and his journey. I have a book titled You Are Amazing, I Am Amazing that teaches kids about self-esteem, and those are my 5 self-published books. My most recent book that I aforementioned, Danny Dollars Make Your Own Money, is my only published book from an actual publishing company that saw the success I was having with my first book, Danny Dollar, and asked me to write a spin-off of that book, and that's what this book is. And this book is basically just a blueprint to teach kids how to make their own money, including having a workbook, worksheets in the back that teaches kids that they can create their own budget and business plan, and that's why it's one of the foundation of my program, the Danny Dollar Entrepreneur Fair.
For those who are not watching this on YouTube, when he opened that book, there literally was a page that said "My Business Plan" to give kids the opportunity to put pen to paper and actually have this unfold for them. Incredible. So you then reached out and started doing youth motivational speaking. Did that come from the books, or that was just a different passion of love?
So it was the result of discovering, as I was, pitching my books to stores and being rejected so often, and then going to schools and talking about my book, I discovered a lot of kids didn't like to read. And that really hurts my heart because I grew up as an avid reader and knowing the power of books. So how do I cultivate a culture of kids who don't like to read? And I've always thought the way to do that was to get anyone interested in anything is to inject humor. So I started creating kind of these stand-up motivational speakings to encourage kids to read. And I do this really funny comedic stand-up PowerPoint presentation called The 5 Reasons Why You Need to Read. And I've probably performed that comedy skit that lasts about 45 minutes in maybe 300 schools across the country. And it really gets kids motivated as well as entertained about why reading matters. And it was that platform of speaking to so many kids about the power of reading that really pushed me forward into becoming more of a motivational speaker and showcasing why reading is so important. But then compounding that with illiteracy and how illiteracy is so much a foundation of so many of the things that ail our country, from mass incarceration to teen pregnancy to drug use to unemployment and poverty. It's all directly, not indirectly, but directly connected to illiteracy. So while I'm inspiring and educating kids in the daytime about enjoying the power of reading, during the evening, I'm visiting jails and youth organizations and schools about illiteracy and why it matters so much. And to uplift our culture and our society. And that had propelled me to do 3 TED Talks about illiteracy, as well as visiting countless organizations and institutions about why we as a society have to push reading and writing and why it just matters so much to uplift our culture and our society.
For our audio listeners, he's wearing a hoodie that says "Read or Else." Is that your line, sir?
That is my line. It is the line that I created after, along with a business partner of mine, Eddie Taylor. I created it as I was discovering all these statistics about illiteracy and how it impacts our country. So the term "read or else" just kind of popped in. I took it, the logo, and put it on a T-shirt or a hoodie, and with each sale, we send a copy of Danny Dollar to a child in a youth in a Title I school or a homeless shelter. So I really wanted this line and this mantra to be more than just a talking point. So with each purchase, we like to say with each purchase, we change a child's life because we're putting a book into their hand that will hopefully change their life.
Talking point. I feel like it's an action point. Read or else, as it shows. Again, for those who can't see it, are you threatening me?
I hear that so often, and I guess in a way I am. And I think that's kind of part of the point.
Yes, sir.
Because if you don't read, you really are in a social deficit of things that are going to hinder your life in some capacity or another. And I don't think that there's an entity out there that empowers empowers anyone out there more than reading does. And without that skill set of reading for joy, for pleasure, for entertainment, as well as for academic and education, you're just doing yourself an injustice, and you're just not going to thrive as well as you could otherwise. So yes, it is a threat.
3 TED Talks. Let me see here. You did the first one. You left your wallet, so they asked you to come back. You did the second one. You tripped on your way out, and they said, "No, bro, we give you the do-over." How did you get 3?
You know what's funny is that many people ask me, "How do you do 3 TED Talks?" And I can say that you do them by doing good work. And what I mean by that is I never applied for any of the TED Talks. They called me. And the reason they called me is that I was constantly, and still am constantly, in my community promoting the power and the joy of reading. And that fosters these relationships with media outlets and as well as corporations and community leaders. And that word gets around. And so when TED is looking for a speaker under a certain type of skill set For example, my very first TED Talk, they literally said they Googled literary advocates, and my name popped up. And so they found me and they called me and they asked me if I would do it, and it always had been a dream of mine. And so so I did. So I did not directly like reach out to them and say, hey, I would love to do a TED Talk. They reached out to me because of my advocacy and work around promoting literacy.
What locations were you doing these TED Talks at?
So my first one was in Albany. So the Albany chapter of TEDx reached out to me. My second one was in Berkshire County in Western Massachusetts. And what was funny about that was that they called me 3 days before the TED was going to be done because one of their speakers bowed out. So they had seen my previous TED Talk and asked, could I do one? The only problem was they asked me on a Friday and they needed it, and the TED Talk was on a Monday. So I had 48 hours to come up with the concept and a talk, and it actually wound up being one of my favorite ones.
Wow.
And then the third one was also in a city called North Adams in Massachusetts. So one was done in Albany, New York. The other two were done in Massachusetts. And in each case, they reached out to me.
Huh. I know Massachusetts very well. I lived there, lived over in Bedford.
Okay.
Go down into the city. Would I impress you, Ty, that if I told you I'm a motorcycle rider, I lived that life on too, and I rode year round when I was in Massachusetts. Does that impress you?
Substantially so. Yes, I think that's incredibly impressive.
I'll tell people that don't know, they do a great job of cleaning out the roads. I mean, that ride from Bedford, 30 minutes, I layered up. I don't think I would have gone any further. I wouldn't have came in from Worcester, but for Bedford, yeah, I made that work. I love Massachusetts. I think Massachusetts gets a bad rap. I've spent some time in the Northeast. I lived again in Boston for a few years. I had some fraternity brothers. I did join a flag football league. So I'll admit that gave me some connections. But what say you about good old Mass, Boston, the Northeast, and some of the stereotypes they get of lack of hospitality and or kindness?
I'm not a fan of Massachusetts. And in part for two reasons. One, again, I was born and raised in the Bronx. I grew up as a Yankee fan. You organically do not like Boston simply because of the Red Sox. So there's that. You're literally at like my first three words were Dada, Mama, Yankee. Like that was those were my first three words.
Yeah.
So organically, you are just have this innate this hatred. Maybe that's a little strong, but for the Boston Red Sox and Massachusetts as a whole. The other reason is because I don't want to say it's a stereotype, but one, it's very cold. Two, it's not very diverse. And that lack of diversity, in my opinion, just breeds. It just doesn't have the connection that I wish I'd like to have. But with that being said, I lived in Pittsfield, Massachusetts for 19 years. I cannot put into words, and that's where I created my career or started my career as an author. And I can't express enough how grateful I am that community embraced me the way that it has. I really don't believe I could achieve this level of success starting a business, this particular business, in any other place in the country. I really do believe that. So I am, while albeit that I'm not the biggest fan of Massachusetts as a Bronx born and raised kid who loves the sun, warmth, and diversity, I can't express enough how grateful I am to have started my career there, and I will always tout that as a special place in my heart.
Have you been to Fenway Park to see a Yankees Red Sox game?
I actually have. It was a playoff game 3 years ago. And it was a game 5 in the best of 3. Game 3 in the best of 5, and game 5 in the best of 5. And the Yankees went to Fenway for that game, and fortunately for me, the Yankees lost. Because if they won, because I had on the whole gambit. I had the Yankees jersey, the Yankees hat, and they were giving me smack the entire time. And I got a feeling that if the Yankees would have won, I might not have walked out of there with that shirt clean. It probably would have had some blood stains on them. But fortunately for me, the Yankees lost, and I was able to walk out of Fenway unscathed. Great ballpark. Yeah. I've probably been to 10 ballparks across the country. I can honestly say it's one of my favorites. It's and the fans are obviously like diehard, and it made the visit a lot of fun.
The monster, it's real.
The monster, yeah. That Penske pole is no joke.
Oh, so they lost. I'm sure that was still a long walk for you. Let's go back to 19 years. That means you were living in Massachusetts when the Patriots were on their run, and the team that stopped them from winning the Super Bowl was a New York team, the Giants.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because where I lived in Western Massachusetts was only about 45 minutes away from Albany, New York. So there was a great, there was a huge population of New York fans there. So you would find Jets and Giants fans as well as Yankee and Mets fans in the area, just as many as you would find Red Sox fans.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as adversarial as you might think. Yeah. So and of course I was rooting for the Giants. It couldn't have been happier.
Honorary doctorate recipient. Who, where, why, how? I need all those details. Proud of you, by the way. So what's the background there?
So I don't think it's much different than the premise of doing the TED Talks. My relevance to my community and promoting literacy to our young people is something that was well known within the community, big and small, from corporations and institutions to schools, and certainly colleges. And the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, or MCLA, 4 years ago, was it 4 years ago? 4 years ago, honored me by reaching out and saying that they wanted to bestow me an honorary doctorate degree for my promoting literacy to young people, in addition to allowing me to give their commencement speech. Cool. So that was that, and it was during the era of COVID, so it was all done virtually.
Yes,
but it was an honor to actually receive. I received it in person, the doctorate, but my commencement speech was done virtually. But I tout that as one of my greatest achievements, in part because I've never gone to college. And I remember hanging out with my collegiate, buddies who had graduated from pristine universities and institutions, and them talking about their collegiate life. And it would be a conversation that I couldn't be a part of. And there was always a little bit of shame, if I'm being really honest, in not having graduated, considering myself a guy of relative intelligence, but not academic. So there was always this kind of, if I'm being honest, a kind of inferiority complex with not having a college experience. So out of all of those friends, not one of them has a doctorate. So now I can go and put it in their face and say, I earned my degree actually doing the work, not studying for the work. So it gives me kind of this little sense of pride that I might not have had otherwise. But yeah, I'm completely honored to have received that, and it's not something that's bestowed upon many. So I'm very, very grateful and fortunate to have one myself.
When one has a doctorate, do you lead with that? On some instances, do you lead with Dr. Allan Jackson? I mean, you have it, you got to use it, right?
Yes and no. I did some research only to discover that for an honorary doctorate, it is frowned upon to use the title of doctor.
Okay.
So I don't use it in a blatant professional sense, but I do in kind of a subliminal when I'm reaching out to schools and organizations. I think that the moniker of doctor is appreciated and valued, So,
Yes.
so on my resume, I certainly put, you know, when I'm reaching out to an organization, that I'm an honorary doctorate recipient. But I don't generally like it. I don't boast myself as Dr. Allan Jackson. It's frowned upon technically
Okay.
in the world of academia. But you know, like just socially, like when I'm hanging out or whatever, I might throw it around every once in a while.
Hey, can somebody pass the macaroni and cheese down here to Dr. Allan Jackson? I figure that's where I
That's
would use
awesome.
it. Any and every chance.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like, you
Does,
know,
does the wife call you doctor?
absolutely not. She wants the opposite. She calls me many things that would probably be completely adverse to a doctor. Knucklehead, bozo. Like there's a
Yes.
whole bunch of other things. But doctor, no, no, not even close.
When you're accomplished, how does that mate treat you? Are they the ones that keep you grounded? Are they the ones that bring you back and say, "Man, I knew you back when"? Is that kind of accurate with your spouse, or do you enjoy the maybe the hoisting up on their shoulders to say, "You the man"? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, but for my girlfriend, who has only been my girlfriend of a year, or going on 2 years actually.
Oh, okay.
I'm very fortunate that she is not impressed by much. So titles and prestige and hierarchies mean absolutely positively nothing to her. So it's very cool that she doesn't look at this work as something that should be exalted. But she is very, very proud of the work, and she really admires my commitment to bettering the lives of young people through literacy. But she definitely makes sure that it's not something that I can use as a way to kind of, boast my ego.
Yes.
No, like that's not happening with her, and I'm grateful for it because she keeps things in real, true perspective. For her, it's about how we treat others, not titles that we're bestowed upon, and that's really what should matter anyway.
With your youth motivational speaking, being a literacy advocate, I'm sure in visiting some schools, seeing some kids in circumstances, I like that you're giving out a book to, you think you said Title I or homeless shelters. Is there one time where you engaged with a young student, a young reader, and it broke you?
Well, there are in positive ways. Sure. I can't tell you how many times a child, when I go and visit a school, part of my package is that I include books because I'm not Dr. Seuss, I'm not Judy Blume. People don't know me.
Yes.
So when I visit a school for the first time, we send books ahead of time. That's part of the package. So they receive books ahead of time. So kids get familiar with my work before I show up. And more times than I can count, and I'm proud to say that many kids who were reluctant readers will say, I didn't like reading until I read your book. Ooh. And I have a number of videos of young people who have told me just that, and it makes my heart happy every time, because as an indie author, you don't get into this for the money. This isn't something where most people are going to become multi-millionaires, even though I totally anticipate that happening for me. But for most, it does not. You do it because it matters. You do it because this speaks to your heart, and you have a message that you want to get out into the world. And nothing is more gratifying than when someone receives that message and uses it to kind of fulfill their own message. And so when young people tell me that they hated reading until they saw my book or read my books, it is the most gratifying thing that I can think of as an author.
I mentioned earlier you have 6 books, 5 self-published. That's prolific in my eyes. Where do we go next? Do you have another book? Spoiler alert, that you already have, that you're workshopping. Do you think you need to give it a little time? Is it getting harder for you? Where are you at in that process?
That's a great question. I am currently right now working on a sequel to my very, very first book, Danny Dollar, although I have a spinoff of that book. I don't technically have a sequel. So I've been working on that over the summer. I like to say I'm 2/3 of the way done, so I hope to have it out by mid next year. But I'm cashing in all my chips on the Danny Dollar Entrepreneur Fair.
Yeah.
We implemented it last year with over 500 students in Western Massachusetts, and to see these 500 beaming faces just eager to showcase their idea for their business that they use their talents to create is something that I'll never forget. And I also feel that the Danny Dollar Entrepreneur Fair is a program that can be implemented in every school across the country to help young people learn about finance and entrepreneurship. So I should be working on more works, but I'm using the books that I currently have as tools for kids to kind of elevate who it is that they are. So that's where a lot of my work is going. In addition to just, creating reels and stuff on social media, which I think is how you found me in the first place. I do love the platform of social media and being able to showcase my joy and positivity and advocacy through those platforms. But I'm also excited to try to get my books into other forms of media. Two of my books have been adapted into theatrical productions, and which is really, really awesome as I say that out loud. And one book in particular is the foundation of a current Nickelodeon actor who is trying to become the super duper kid. So he is right now currently, I can't say who he is, but he has a pretty great platform. And right now he's pitching to the executives at Nickelodeon to make the super duper kid into a feature on television.
The Danny Dollar Entrepreneur Fair. I mean, I got a cousin in Bed-Stuy. I mean, he always got something that he says I can take this and I can flip that into that. What's the do I send them through? First question. Second question, what's that age range? How low do you dip for the fair, and how high do you go?
So for the fair, we've targeted fifth graders solely. So it's the book age range for this is we would say from as early as third grade to maybe sixth grade. So as far as grade levels are concerned. But fifth grade is the target audience for the Entrepreneur Fair. We like the idea where most fifth graders, at least where we are in where I was in Western Massachusetts, that's their last year of elementary school. And I feel like that's an ideal space for kids to kind of cultivate this entrepreneurial component to their lives. And so we do it with just fifth graders. We're not opposed to doing it with other grade levels, but we feel like fifth grade is the sweet spot for that.
Yeah, I get that. Do you often get people that maybe come up to you and say, you know what, Ty, I got an idea. I got an idea for you. Does that happen?
As an idea for a book or idea for a business?
For a book.
It happens way too often. And it happens way too often. And most people come in with the objective of an idea for me. And I always state that if this is something that you've, brought as an idea, then it's something that means something to you. And so the person to write that book should be you, not me.
Yeah.
I have plenty of people saying, I should write a book about acceptance, or a book about divorce, or a book about handicaps, or a book about whatever topic that means something to someone. And the fact that those people are bringing that to my attention tells me that topic matters to them. And that person that write that book should be them. I want to make sure that the books I write have a certain vibe and a certain feel to it. For example, all of my books the main characters are children of color, but there is nothing stereotypical about those children. Like whatever you may think of what a young Black kid may be, that's not what they are. They're not from the hood. They're not from a single parent. They're not impoverished. They're just young kids, just living their best life. And that really matters to me. I want my books to be joyful. I want them to be broad so that every kid can enjoy them without the heaviness or the stigma of things that adults put on them. I just want them to read for joy, because that's how I became a reader and how I found my purpose place in life, just by reading about things that made me happy. And that's exactly what I want to do for our young people.
Ty, to get to know you a little more, what are you listening to now in the car? What music? Where are you at? What genres do you start with? I'm just curious there.
Sure, I've got a hodgepodge of places. Usually, if you go to my Sirius XM radio, the first one is smooth jazz. That's my primary default channel. I love jazz. It's just kind of homegrown for me. It's just a comfy, warm pillow. The opposite of that would probably be old school hip hop, followed by classic rock. I'm a huge classic rock fan. And then oddly enough, Howard Stern. I am a big Howard Stern fan for many, many reasons. I've been listening to him ever since I was in middle school. And I admire him. I think he's crass. I think if you really listen to him, you wouldn't get that impression at all. He's a very dedicated family man and husband. But what I love most about Howard Stern is his resiliency. No matter how many times he's been fired, no matter how many times he's been fined, no matter how many times he's been reprimanded, he sticks to who he is, and he makes you conform, not him. And I really admire that about him. We should all have that sense of conviction about what it is that we stand for. And that has made him arguably the most important radio personality in the history of radio. And that's one of the things I admire most about him. Not to mention, I just think he's funny.
You mentioned hip hop. You talked about the being around, seeing the birth. Ty, I need to know. I'm not going to argue it. What's your top 5 dead or alive?
Oh man, great question. Okay, so number 1, Biggie. Albeit that he doesn't have the catalog that many other hip hop artists has. I don't think anyone has more talent. Biggie's number 1. Ice Cube is number 2. Ice Cube as an art, America's Most Wanted, his first album is still, in my opinion, one of the greatest albums ever made. And then in no particular order, I will say Chuck D from Public Enemy, Rakim, Big Daddy Kane. Whoa. I think that's where I'm going to stay right there. Honorable mentions to KRS-One and Naughty by Nature, Tribe Called Quest, but I'm definitely in that old school genre. Much respect, Joe, to J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar, who are like the best on the planet right now. Yeah. But Kane and Ice Cube, Chuck D, Biggie, those are that's my go-to.
Ty, have you ever been down here to Austin, Texas, where I live?
I have not. It is definitely on my list. I hear the most amazing things about Austin. I'm looking forward to visiting there one day. I've been to Houston. I've been to Dallas. I think those are the only 2 places in Texas that I've been to. But San Antonio and Austin are definitely tops on my list of places to visit in Texas.
If you have a chance to go to a concert, which one are you going to? And they could be dead or alive.
My girlfriend, it's not even a debate. Like I said, I'm a big classic rock fan. U2 has a residency in Las Vegas at the Sphere, and we will be taking out a second mortgage to get the tickets to be able to go see U2 in February, and I'm really excited about that. I'm a huge U2 fan. I've seen them in concert twice, and I love them.
36 shows they're doing over there in Vegas at the Sphere. That's going to be a great venue for you to go to. Beyonce said, I'd be willing to come, but I'm starting at 10 million. That's what y'all gave U2. What are your thoughts there on her saying, this is where I'm starting at, 10 mil? What are your thoughts?
Wait, 10 mil for what?
For her residency.
Oh, hey, listen, I am all for anyone getting anything. I have no animosity to athletes making these absorbent amount of money, or anyone else for that matter. It's supply and demand. If they have a talent and people are willing to pay for that talent, make as much money as you can. Whether you hit a baseball or catch a catch a touchdown or sing a song or act or perform. I'm all for anyone on this planet doing as well as they possibly can in any way. Good for her. I have no idea what her philanthropic component of her life is, but I want to hope that it's really well, because you can only do but so much with as much as you make. And and you have to use, I like to think you use some of that to make the lives of others better. But good for her. I for 10 mil a residency, I would start at $1 billion if I was her. I mean, you kidding me? Like, yes. She's underselling herself if she's asking for 10 million.
I agree. The merch.
She makes 10 million going to the bathroom. Like, that doesn't sound right. But, you know, what do I know?
Ty, very curious on your thoughts. What was the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life?
I don't know if I like the word mistake. What's the thing that I may have learned a lesson from, or what's the thing, maybe a regret I might have? I regret never going to college, not for the academia, but for the life experience.
Sure.
I regret when I had the choice to move to New York or move to California, I chose New York. Even though it was the best thing for me, I think I would have had a much more eclectic life moving to California as a young person. Other than that, I don't think I have any real mistakes. I just, you have victories or you have lessons, and that's kind of been my philosophy in life. So I've made very few mistakes. But I've learned a lot from some of the things that maybe haven't worked out so well. But honestly, I've had a pretty amazing life, and I would trade nothing.
I like that.
Yeah.
So if you were going back to Cali,
I don't think so.
NorCal or SoCal, where would you put up that residence?
It would probably be, when you go to New York, you go to New York City. When you go to California, you go to LA. I mean, so yeah, it would definitely be LA. Like, it's one of my favorite cities in the world. It's unbelievable. It is just it's an adult playground, and
yes.
And I'm looking forward to exploring it more now that I'm a Californian.
I'm so curious on what is your favorite car? A man of the 60s, you've been able to see some gems. I'm thinking the Shelby, Eleanor, famous from Gone in 60 Seconds. I'm thinking of that GT that Ford made. What's your favorite car?
So as a kid, my grandfather gave me a model Porsche Carrera 911. Ooh. And that has stuck with me my whole life. And I vowed that before I hit 50 years old, I would own a Porsche. I'm 56 now, and I have not gotten that Porsche just yet, but I will not be buried in the earth until I have that car, until I own that car. So yes, Porsche Carrera 911 white. It is inevitable.
I am a Porsche guy. The Cayman is the one, that mid-engine, if you remember. It's sure-footed as a goat. That's my Porsche that I like. The Bentley would be my car of choice.
Good call.
That Continental, that Flying Spur, the Cadillac CTS-V draws my attention. There's a lot of power on tap. So those are the ones that get me going. My very first car, Ty, was a '73 Cadillac. Wow,
that's dope.
Had the 8-track in it.
Wow,
and a bunch of skinny high schoolers. We could fit 4 or 5 people in that front bench seat.
Yeah.
I saw you were on a longboard on one of your reels. So I'm a skater. And yeah, our boards would fit in that trunk and we would go and have a session. So short board for street skating, or are you a longboard aficionado?
I am neither. That was just a prop to use for this particular post that I was doing.
Yes.
That was my girlfriend's son's skateboard.
Yeah.
Skateboarding is not my thing. I have rollerbladed when I lived in New York City. I actually used to rollerblade to work
Oh.
through Central Park, which was an obnoxious amount of fun. But I just bought some new skates last year. I have only worn them once, I'm ashamed to say. But now that I live in California, I definitely want to be part of that skating vibe. So I will be doing that, but probably not skateboarding. I don't say no to anything. I try anything, but skateboard is probably not the thing I want to do. I think I'd rather roller skate.
You looked comfortable, so kudos to you. You did a
Well,
great
thanks.
job.
I appreciate that.
What? Let's go back to this roller skating. You're at the roller rink.
Yep.
This song comes on. You know you ain't sitting down. What is that song?
You know what? As a kid, I used to roller skate a lot, and when Queen's Another One Bite the Dust would come on, yeah, man, it was just something about that song. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom.
Slap.
There was just something about that. Yeah, like that song was that and the Sugar Hill Gang, which I think I just did.
Yes,
those were
yeah.
two songs that once those two songs came on, you weren't sitting down.
I feel like there's some poetry energy in you. Would I be correct there?
You would be very incorrect. Not a poet, not an appreciative of poets as much as I probably could and should be. Not a thing for me, except for one exception, and that's Shel Silverstein, who is a children's book author, genius extraordinaire. His poets and poetry are my biggest inspiration as an author. And if you're not familiar with Shel Silverstein's work, he wrote a book called The Giving Tree. That's probably his most popular work. And but he has a number of other books with tremendous amount of poetry. Where the Sidewalk Ends is one of his more popular ones. And but outside of that, and maybe a little Emily Dickinson, I'm not much into poetry, not reading or creating.
Ty, we're almost out of here. I ask all of the guests, I believe in 6 degrees of separation. Who is the most interesting person that you know, and what are you willing to do to help me get them on this podcast? They don't have to be rich. They don't have to be famous. Yep. Interesting. That's the word. Yes.
That's a great question. And this may sound just as a softball. My mom. I think my mom has had a really eclectic life. She worked in a place called Spofford in New York, which is basically the Rikers Island of children. And she was a counselor for them. And I can honestly say that any child she engaged with saw the world a little bit differently afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think the power that she wielded as this loving, angelic soul was something that even the most hardened young people couldn't dismiss. And not to mention, she raised, myself and my siblings single-handedly, working numerous jobs and getting a master's degree in education, and doing it with duct tape and bubble gum. And she would probably be the most interesting person. Not to mention, she's just my mom. But if I had to think of anybody else, boy, that would be a tough one. It's funny. Many people think that they have a book because they think their lives are so interesting, and in most cases, they're not. Yes. Most people's lives are pretty humdrum. You may think your life is interesting, but it's probably not interesting to everybody. Everybody's got their own journey with their own trials and tribulations and their own victories and failures, and yours probably isn't much different than anybody else's. And so that book that you think that is out there, but as your life story, it's not the juggernaut that you think it is. But yeah, I'm gonna just default to my mom.
So what would you be willing to do? You'll put a little bug in her ear and say, "Hey, Ma, I got this guy. He'd be interested in having you come on a podcast." Would you have to explain to her what a podcast is?
I would no, because she's had her share of podcasts listening, mostly because of me. I don't think she proactively listens to podcasts, but when I'm doing one, she listens to almost every one of them, almost, and it's an audio scrapbook. But I think that she would be interested. Getting her to navigate to get physically on one might be the bigger challenge. Sure, she's very inept when it comes to tech. But I think I could make it work. And I'll tell you, she would be a really fun guest. And
it sounds
like a beautiful story. She's a beautiful soul. And I think that she would give you a really, really good interview. So if you want it to happen, I will make it happen.
Ty, I got 2 final questions.
Go for it.
Number 1, what would your peers say about you to describe you?
I think they would say I had a really great sense of humor and that I am tenacious when it comes to getting what I want. Like, there is no boulder that you could put in front of me to get the thing that I want to get. That boulder will be moved. But that I also have a pretty decent sense of humor. And I think those would be the 2 things that most people would say about me.
Ty, the last question is, would you be interested in any of your books being audio? You're a reading advocate, literacy advocate. Maybe that goes against where your touchstone is. Would you be interested, or would that be blasphemy for you?
No, certainly not blasphemy. I think you have to meet people where they are. If people are into audiobooks, which many people are, I think that it would be good. In my particular, the way I am right now, I wouldn't be as interested in doing it for a couple of reasons. One, I think most kids don't listen to audiobooks. I think it's important for kids to have books in their hands, whether they're electronic or physical books. And also, as an indie author, I really take my energies and put it into things that are much more tangible. And I don't think audiobooks for kids are a tangible thing right now. They could be. I don't dismiss anything, but just being old school and putting books in hands is what I'm trying to do, and that's where my focus is. So the audiobooks or other platforms would take a back seat for now.
Ty, this was awesome. For our listeners, how can we find you on social media? And is there any last minute info you'd like to pass on, as any book signings, any live visits you're going to have? How can we find you, and what do you got coming up? Anything that you want to plug?
Well, thank you for putting that out there. You can find me on pretty much every platform, from Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn and Pinterest, by just putting Ty Allan Jackson, as well as my website is tyallanjackson.com. And my biggest project right now I'm working on is the Danny Dollar Entrepreneur Fair. My objective is to get it in as many elementary schools across the country as possible. And the one thing that I will leave your listeners with, or viewers with, is, as an author, I have had the privilege to speak to hundreds of thousands of children. And one of the things I think we're doing a disservice to is speaking up to them. I think we're very accustomed to talking down to our children to meet them on their level. We need to do a better job of having our children speak up to ours. So challenge them about, the world around them, about financial literacy, about sex, about religion. Challenge them and talk up to them and let them meet us where we are, not the other way around.
God, well said. Well, thank you. Ty Allan Jackson. Listeners, please follow, please like, subscribe. This is episode 33. I like big bucks, and I cannot lie. Thank you, Ty.
Thank you.
A great night.